Hey there all. So since the last update, I have made all of my scarf cuts, glued them together, and I am ready to put up the strong back. But I'm not gonna just skip over all of that because there's a lot of information in this that you may wanna know, because quite frankly, this was a pain in the butt to do. So the stringers that I cut in the last video ended up having a few knots that need to be taken out. Now to do so, I'm gonna end up having to cut it and do what they call a scarf joint. All right, so let's say that we've got our long pieces of wood, right? Which are 1 inch by 3/4. And we've got a knot, let's say right here. Now obviously if I try to bend that, it's gonna end up cracking it and it's not gonna be good. So what that means is that I actually have to cut out a piece like so. And what that will do is that will allow me to get rid of that little junk piece here and put these two pieces back together. And what actually holds those two pieces together is I glue each one of these cuts here, and then I just put them together and close the gap. Now I'm gonna have to do quite a few of those like that, and so therefore having a jig to be able to get that angle just right is gonna be really important. So I do believe that I showed you guys the first scarfing jig that I made and how the little sled part of it just wasn't working out for me. And what I found out was that it was basically not anything really wrong with my little sled piece, but it was more an issue with the table saw. You see, this table saw that I bought because I wanted something that worked but wasn't high end, it ends up having these two little tabs in where the sled goes. So basically you're forced to try to make an upside down T sled. And honestly, that just doesn't work very well for me. And so what I ended up doing was taking the grinder to a brand new table saw. And it works great because now all I have to do is cut a little rectangle piece to fit down in that groove and I'm good to go. Which definitely makes things a whole lot easier when trying to make things like a scarfing jig. Because, well, it needs to be repeatable every single time the exact same. So I made this, it was about 1 inch wider, but when I put it down on a table saw and everything, I decided to go ahead and figure out right where I wanted the little sled to be at and then cut off the rest of it. Obviously this went over so that when I made that cut, it would cut it at the right angle and everything would be all good. Now unfortunately, because I cut off more than I thought that I was going to be, this piece right here, this flat portion here, is about 7 inches. So I cut off about a full inch off of the board, as well as the little clamp board here on the jig. So what that ended up doing was, instead of having me have about an 8-inch scarf, I ended up having about a 6-inch scarf, which is perfectly fine. That's actually what the directions called for anyway. And from everybody that I've been talking to on the boat forums and stuff, 6 inches, 6 to 12 inches is a pretty big range. So as long as you've got about 6 inches, you're good. And obviously the more contact with glue that you have, the stronger the scarf joint is gonna be. So hopefully you guys kind of understand how this sled works. If you want me to go through a little more detail on this sled specifically that I built, make sure that you let me know down in the comments section, and maybe I'll do a full video just on the sled itself with dimensions and all that kind of fun stuff as well. Then came the glue up. Now I am on a very dirt floor in here, and there's no truly long flat area in here. So I ended up going outside, and the shop here has a little bit of a concrete slab all the way across the front of it. So that's where I ended up gluing these up at. Now I found out that I was gonna end up needing a lot more clamps because of how many scarf joints I was gonna have and how long it was actually gonna take to glue all them up. So I went ahead and got some 3.5-inch PVC pipe, and I made myself a whole ton of little PVC clamps, which worked out absolutely great. So what I figured out was taking the Type Bond 3, and I would put a nice thick line of glue on the scarf joint, and then I just bought a 89-cent brush and brushed it on so that then there was an even coat all the way along the scarf joint. Then I turned the scarf joint sideways, line it up to the other scarf cut, and I would connect them. Now if you try to use the PVC clamps alone, you're not going to get a good lineup. So what I was doing is I was taking a spring clamp, shoving it in the center, and then I was putting a PVC clamp on each side, and that was holding it fairly well. And then once the glue started to dry, I was able to very confidently, easily take that spring clamp off and put it onto the next one that I needed it for. So now that all of the longitudinals were glued up and ready to be sanded, I needed to get rid of all that excess glue that was on all of the joints. So how I did that was I ended up using this little shaver guy here. I'm not sure exactly what these are called, but they are very handy for getting rid of a lot of glue and a lot of wood at one time. And I had a few that weren't lined up perfectly, or that for some reason the board was a little bit thicker where the joint was. So this really made an easy job of getting rid of all that glue and flattening out those joints. Then came me sanding the longitudinals just to get any points off of them, so that one, it would be easier to work with, and two, because I really don't want sharp edges on that fabric once I go to skin it. And I've been told by several people that it is much easier to sand all the longitudinals down before you go ahead and start building the boat, because otherwise you've got to work around the boat itself, and that can just be a pain. So what I used to do that with most of the time was just a simple sanding block. And yes, this took me hours to sand down all the edges on these to my probably ridiculous satisfaction. However, when I wasn't using the regular sanding block, I was using this, which is just a little mini plane, and it was kind of fun because I never really used a plane before, and just being able to make really small thin curls with this was kind of fun, all while taking the corners off of the longitudinals. So now what does that leave me with? Well, it leaves me with all of the longitudinals, which are the long pieces that go along the boat, in lengths of about 18 to 20 feet. I have a few 20s in there because I ended up cutting up yet another board to make some extras. I hope I have extras anyway. And that should do me for making this boat. So what's next? Well, now it's time for me to go ahead and clean up the shop. I've got sawdust everywhere. I've got boards everywhere that I don't need, or that are extras or spares or whatever. So I'm gonna work on cleaning that up. And in the next video, I'll be making the strong back. And as always, if you want to follow along in this canoe building process with me, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And because I'm not regularly uploading on this channel, make sure to hit that bell so that you know when I put out a new video. And until next time, you have a good one.